Hello and welcome to Playback, Tier 2 World's weekly showcase of our best stories from around the globe. Coming up,
an event cancelled is better than a life cancelled.
The World Health Organization urges caution during the holiday season as the Omicron variant sweeps through communities. Turkish Lira rallies against the dollar after the government announced new measures. No room for retreat over Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin says Russia will adopt a military response if the West doesn't back down. And we will look at how preparations are shaping up for a second pandemic Christmas. Well, just before the holiday season, a dire warning from the World Health Organization. An event cancelled is better than a life cancelled. Health authorities are now urging people to reconsider holiday gatherings. Omicron cases have been detected in over 100 countries, and case numbers have risen sharply in the US and Europe. The WHO says the new variant can affect fully vaccinated people and those who have recovered from the virus before, and warns against complacency. And governments around the world are facing quite a Christmas conundrum. How to balance festive freedoms with together coronavirus restrictions. The Omicron variant is continuing its rapid spread, and that's forced many authorities to rethink COVID-19 regulations for the holiday season. Sarah Morris reports.
It's been a month now since South Africa raised the red flag and alerted the world to the existence of Omicron. Since then, scientists have been working around the clock to try and find out just how dangerous the variant is. Finally, we now have some data. A study by the UK Health and Security Agency found people with Omicron are 50 to 70% less likely to be admitted to hospital than those infected with the Delta variant. However, the results were largely based on people under the age of 40, as that group currently make up most of the UK's Omicron cases. The analysis also showed the effect of the booster vaccine is already beginning to wane in some people, with a 10 to 25% drop in efficacy 10 weeks after the third shot is administered.
Perhaps the infection when you get it might be less severe in terms of hospitalisation. But of course, with this very, very rapid rise and increase in cases, then of course, more cases means more pressure, because if even though a smaller proportion might get severe disease or go into hospital, that could still result in many cases. And of course, that could give pressure on the health service.
And that's why countries across the world struggling to contain the rapid surge of the virus are reintroducing restrictions. Spain and Greece have brought back compulsory mask wearing in indoor settings. Italy has too, but it's also insisting the more protective FFP2 masks be worn in some indoor spaces like cinemas.
I totally agree. I think it's a measure that had to be taken. Just like the vaccine, everybody should get the vaccine, everybody should wear masks.
We had let ourselves go a bit, and people were not respecting the rules. It's good to see the rules tightening and people paying a bit more attention now.
In China, the approach is more strict, with 13 million residents in the city of Xi'an plunged into lockdown this week after recording just 52 new cases of the virus. The sweeping restrictions come as the country prepares for the Lunar New Year travel rush and the Beijing Winter Olympics due to kick off in February. But for much of the Western world at least, there's a reluctance to impose harsh measures before Christmas. However, that could come at a cost. As people travel to see loved ones over the festive period, authorities are bracing for an even swifter swell of case numbers in the coming weeks. Sarah Morris, TRT World.
On Tuesday, the U.S. president announced a federal government plan to open new testing sites across the country, as well as 500 million free at-home tests. The president will deploy more federal aid to hospitals low on resources. The push comes as people in the U.S. gear up for Christmas holiday travel.
We're prepared today for what's coming. In March of 2020, we were not ready. Today, we stockpiled enough gowns, masks, and ventilators to deal with the surge of hospitalizations among the unvaccinated. Today, we're ready.
And on Wednesday, Turkey's homegrown COVID-19 vaccine Turkovac received emergency use approval. Trials found the vaccine is safe and effective, and now mass production has begun. Turkovac will be distributed across the country as of next week. At the same time, Turkey also pledged to make it available globally.
Tamamen kendi bilim insanlarımız.
It is very meaningful that this vaccine is a product developed entirely by our own scientists, researchers, and whose patent belongs to us. After a long period of study and preparation, our Turkovac vaccine, which is ready for production and use, having obtained the necessary approvals, is a symbol of our efforts to protect our nation against the epidemic. Thus, we will be able to offer our local vaccine, Turkovac, as a third alternative to our citizens after Sinovac and BioNTech.
Staying in Turkey now, the government has announced measures to bolster the national currency and help consumers cope with the rising cost of living. The new policies aim to make Lira assets more attractive, and the policies have had an immediate impact. Polo Montesilo reports.
The Turkish lira has seen its biggest rally in 4 decades. That's after the government unveiled radical reforms to counter market volatility that's fueled inflation.
Bundan sonra hiçbir vatandaşımızın
From now on, none of our citizens will feel the need to convert their deposits from Turkish lira to foreign currency over concerns that the exchange rate will be higher.
ortaklık zirvesi de hamdolsun
Ankara says it will compensate depositors for losses they incur due to currency fluctuations. That compensation will be tax-free. The central bank's also opening a new channel through which exporters can get dollars at more predictable rates. And the government's hiking pension subsidies to 30% from the previous 5%. The lira rallied around 40% after the announcement, but it still lost more than 70% against the dollar this year. A stronger currency will bring down the cost of imports like food and fuel. That's expected to stabilize consumer prices, which rose more than 21% in November.
What's going to happen is prices are going to come down. They have to come down, because they're now much easier to purchase. The costs of buying these products are much cheaper, and as a result, this will very much slow inflation in the coming months here, and that's great news for the Turkish consumer.
The government says the changes are in line with its policies to encourage exports and investment.
kamu iktisadi teşebbüslerinden elde edilen
Investors will be encouraged to move towards Turkish lira-based assets by issuance of government bills that are indexed to public economic enterprise revenues that are transferred to the budget.
The Turkish economy has outperformed its emerging market peers this year, with GDP expanding 7.4% in the third quarter. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has told businesses and consumers they should feel the full benefits of that growth soon, because he predicts inflation will slow in the coming months. Paolo Montesilio, TRT World.
Over to Europe now. Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country has no room to retreat in its standoff with the U.S. and its allies over Ukraine. Speaking to senior military officials in Moscow, Putin warned Russia will, quote, take adequate military technical response measures to any Western aggression. Putin did not spell out the nature of these measures, but Russia has amassed tens of thousands of troops on its border with Ukraine, sparking fears that Moscow is planning an invasion.
What is happening now, tensions that are building up in Europe, is US and NATO's fault every step of the way. Russia was forced to respond at every step. The situation kept worsening and worsening, deteriorating and deteriorating at every step. And here we are today, in a situation where we're forced to resolve it somehow. We can't allow the situation that I've mentioned, NATO's further expansion eastwards.
Meanwhile, NATO intends to call a new council meeting with Russia in the new year in a bid to defuse tensions.
We have received Russia's recent proposals. We are clear that any dialogue with Russia would also need to address NATO's concerns about Russia's actions, be based on the core principles and documents of European security, and take place in consultation with NATO's European partners, such as Ukraine.
Over to Asia now, where almost 400 people have been killed by Super Typhoon Rai in the Philippines this week. For the hundreds of thousands who have been affected, surviving the destruction is an enormous challenge. There are reports of people running out of clean water and food. The United Nations is hoping to raise over $100 million in aid for the victims. Another country that suffered floods is Malaysia. At least 17 people were dead after heavy flooding. The states of Pahang and Selangor have been hit the hardest, with around 60,000 people displaced. The government has admitted weaknesses in its initial response, but has now deployed emergency and military personnel to help the rescue efforts. Now, the New York Times has obtained classified documents from the Pentagon that reveal serious U.S. intelligence failures have led to thousands of civilian deaths in the Middle East. One example was an airstrike in 2016 that hit a small village in northern Syria called Tokhar. At least 120 people, including children, were killed. The U.S. was providing aerial support to the YPG terror group, and the civilians were mistakenly believed to be Daesh terrorists. The report says no investigation was launched into that incident. The documents detail several similar incidents, some of which resulted in dozens of deaths that were never revealed to the public. The World Food Programme says it's been forced to cut aid to Yemen and warned the move will have dire consequences. The UN agency says it doesn't have the money to sustain its current level of assistance to the country, which has been at war since 2014. It says there could be more cuts if funding doesn't arrive. The change will affect nearly 8 million people. Millions of Yemenis have been displaced, and about 80% of the population depends on aid. There are renewed fears of violence in Libya, where presidential elections scheduled for Friday were postponed on Wednesday. Now, a new parliamentary committee has been created to determine a new one. But some observers doubt Libya has the infrastructure to hold an election and sustain a unified presidency at all. Sarah Balter reports.
The elections on the 24th of December were meant to end the chaos and bloodshed in Libya. The date had been set for more than a year, and now it's another setback. Libya has been split since 2014 between rival factions. The West is held by the internationally recognized Government of National Unity, or GNU, and the East is home to warlord Khalifa Haftar's militia, the LNA. The two sides signed a permanent ceasefire in Geneva in October last year after UN-sponsored talks. The following month, 75 delegates from across Libya met in Tunis for further negotiations, and it was here that the election date was announced. But since then, not enough had been done to ensure the vote could take place on Friday.
The real issue here is we're coming out of 6 years of war, and all the institutions are broke down and they're not talking to each other. And then we have announcements month after month saying this is wrong, that is wrong, I don't agree. But these are institutions that no longer have any legitimacy because they've picked one side of the war or the other.
There has been a period of relative calm in Libya, but tensions have begun to build over whether the GNU can remain in office after its term officially ends on Friday. The UN says armed groups have begun to mobilize in Tripoli, causing further concern over the security situation. The conflict has left people in this oil-rich country divided, tired, and poor. The UN is scrambling to come up with a new political roadmap to salvage the wider peace process, but there are few illusions that is going to be easy. Sarah Balter, TRT World.
Now, remaining in Libya, more than 160 migrants died in 2 separate shipwrecks off the North African country's coast. That's according to a UN official. More than 100 people drowned on December 17 after their wooden boat capsized in the Mediterranean. Just 8 were rescued and returned to shore. And on the following day, the Libyan Coast Guard retrieved at least 62 bodies after a second boat capsized. According to a UN tally, at least 1,500 migrants have drowned off the coast of Libya so far this year. Earlier in the week, Istanbul hosted the Turkey-Africa Partnership Summit, where Turkey pledged to support the continent during the pandemic by sending 15 million vaccine doses. Additionally, the participating nations also agreed on measures to fight the climate change and promote investment. Hassan Abdullah reports.
More than 100 government ministers and 16 presidents from across Africa came to Istanbul for a summit they believe will take relations to new levels. Turkey's trade with Africa in the first 11 months of this year alone hit $30 billion. And at the annual Turkey-Africa Partnership Summit, leaders from 39 African countries and Turkey agreed to do more. They want to increase this trade volume to $75 billion annually over the next few years.
At this point, no country is unaware of the courage of the Turkish private sector and quality of work it does. We've experienced very effective cooperation with the Turkish business world. And in fact, what we're doing here today is a step towards advancing and bolstering the work to be done in the future.
Ankara says Africa continues to be ignored by rich countries.
The fact that only 6% of Africa's population has received the COVID-19 vaccines is a disgrace for humanity. To solve this problem, we plan to share 15 million doses with Africa.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan believes an unjust global order harms Africa in many areas. He says it's a great injustice that Africa, with a population of 1.3 billion people, does not have representation on the UN Security Council. The three-day summit closed on Saturday with appreciation for Turkey's support for Africa. The leaders agreed that Turkey and its African partners will boost their cooperation even further in the hopes of achieving greater development and prosperity. Hassan Abdullah, TRT World.
Turkey has launched a new satellite, its eighth and most powerful to date. A SpaceX rocket has delivered the Turksat 5B into orbit from Cape Canaveral in Florida.
3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff.
The new satellite has a 35-year lifespan and will serve the maritime and aviation sectors. It will increase Turkey's communication data capacity 15-fold. It will also provide service to the Middle East, Europe, and parts of Africa. Now, the holiday season is here, but many in the UK are considering a celebration without the champagne. Along with plant-based meat, cutting out sugar, and a switch to healthier lifestyles, interest in alcohol-free drinks is bubbling. Non-alcoholic beers have been on the shelves for years, but the fastest-growing sector is alcohol-free spirits. Retail sales in the UK alone have increased 30% in the past year. Oliver Reagan reports.
Are the days of the good old lime and soda numbered? 3 Spirit is on a mission to take non-alcoholic drinks to another level, using plants and herbs to produce spirits that provide a buzz without the booze.
We work with world-class bartenders, plant scientists to formulate our liquids. The extraction process of raw material is really important so that we can extract compounds of interest. We focus on what we put in the bottle rather than what we take out. I want to create liquids and products that the drinkers are almost jealous of the non-drinkers.
According to the International Wines and Spirits record, UK sales in the no and low alcohol category, also known as NOLO, are expected to grow by 17% this year. With an increasingly influential well-being movement, more people are choosing mocktails over cocktails.
Whatever the spirit, we can substitute for the clean liquor or other low spirit versions. Cleaner living, it works. You know, sort of, you can see they're coming through the door. The beer in a cocktail now is going to have a non-alcoholic beer and a spirit-free cocktail, which is fantastic. The trend is just growing every week.
This change in habit can be seen across the continent. Research by sustainable food and beverage company Givaudan suggests that 60% of drinkers in Europe are reducing their alcohol consumption.
As drinking habits evolve and innovations increase, a broader range of non-alcoholic options is becoming available. It's fueling a surge in popularity, with the UK's first non-alcoholic off-licence opening in London this month.
The Offie, slang for off-licence, stocks industry leaders such as Seedlip and Liars, which is already valued at more than $350 million after launching less than 2 years ago. But the market is also being flooded by a number of new products.
The UK is the fastest growing market, and I think that's because, the biggest purchasers of alcohol-free are people who still buy alcohol. What they're looking to do is to change out some of their alcohol moments during the week for alcohol-free. About 49% of the UK population are looking to cut down their drinking at the moment. That's 25 million people, so it's no wonder there's so many drinks coming onto the market to serve them.
The holiday season is traditionally a time for indulgence, but perhaps this year's festivities will be a time for moderation and mindful drinking. Oliver Regan, TRT World, London.
Now, the Christmas and New Year holidays are usually a time of celebration in Lebanon. Thousands of tourists come to the country, and some Lebanese living abroad fly home for the festive period. But this year looks very different, as Imogen Kimber reports from Beirut.
Christmas markets like this one used to be a common sight in Beirut. As well as events for foodies, festive street lighting, and there even used to be an ice skating rink. This year, it's a much more muted affair.
See a huge difference between the purchasing power of people that comes here with less money and less possibility than last year, definitely.
Christmas trees cost more than most people's monthly income, and that's without decorations. And for those on the minimum wage of less than $30 a month, it's hard to buy the basics, let alone a lavish Christmas dinner. With nearly 3/4 of the population living in poverty, celebrating Christmas with the usual trimmings is not possible for most. The country's currency has hit yet another all-time low, trading on the black market at 20 times less than it's worth. For those taking a salary, its value is now worth 90% less than it was.
Christmas dinner will be what we already have in the home. Christmas is zero this year. Last year was better than this. This year there's nothing. The minimum price for toys is $10. And this is half of my salary gone, so we cannot buy anything this year.
This 40-year-old toy shop says sales are down by 70% on previous years.
Definitely the sales are much less. People are still buying toys, but they are looking for, let's say, within their limits. Not like before, actually. They used to buy everything for their kids.
Inflation on prices means many shoppers leave empty-handed, and that the toy store is often operating at a loss, unable to raise prices as quickly as the Lebanese pound devalues. Unfortunately, the injection of foreign currency that usually comes with tourists isn't appearing.
Actually, we're really suffering from the situation. The occupancy is definitely lower than the last year and the year before. And this is due to the political and the economical situation we're facing.
Instead of returning for the holiday season as they used to, it seems that the Lebanese are leaving. And ongoing political tensions, combined with COVID-19, have seen numbers of regional tourists, particularly from the Gulf, dwindle. Besides spoiling Christmas, few tourists and limited sales drags Lebanon further into the worst economic crisis it's seen in modern times. Imogen Kimber, TRT World, Beirut.
Now, for many Christians, the name St. Peter's Cathedral brings to mind images of the Vatican in Italy. But the earliest church of St. Peter is in the southern Turkish city of Antalya. Called St. Pierres, it was built into a cave and has become a draw card for thousands of visitors a year. We sent Claire Harriet to explore this place of pilgrimage and how it contributes to faith-based tourism.
St. Pierre's Church in Antalya is a landmark of early Christianity. Built into a mountainside cave in 38 AD, it's one of the oldest Christian churches in the world. It's believed Peter the Apostle preached here, and that draws pilgrims and tourists alike.
We came here because we were curious. We've been curious about it for a long time.
Leila Demirazan is a tour guide and never tires of showing people around.
The first Christians come here. They use the name of Christian in here, so for that reason here is really important. With the landscape, with the architect, here is really important.
St. Pierre's isn't the only example of Christian architecture in Antalya. At 150 years old, the Church of St. Peter and St. Paul is young by the standards of this ancient city. And it too attracts visitors. Father John has been parish priest at this Eastern Orthodox church since 2004. He says people come to the area to visit the churches, synagogues and mosques.
Antalya is a city of love, friendship and brotherhood. Historically, despite having different beliefs, people here have learned to live together and they're teaching that to the world.
Predating all the religious attractions is Antakya's Roman history, with some examples from as far back as the 3rd century BC still visible. Tourism provides a boost to the local economy. In 2019, before the pandemic, Antalya and surrounding areas welcomed about 300,000 visitors. Now, as Turkey's economy recovers from COVID-19, tourists are returning. In Antalya, people don't like to say goodbye to visitors. They say welcome when you arrive, and they say welcome again when you leave, in the expectation that you're coming back. Claire Herriot, TRT World, Antalya.
Well, that rounds up your week of news here on Playback. Stay tuned to TRT World for the latest stories. Happy holidays.